Coogs House. The Houston Cougars look to get back on track in Big 12 play with a home matchup against the Texas Tech Red Raiders. But what do the folks from Lubbock have in store?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs daily podcast, all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who came to stop by, I think we're getting more of those. Make sure you subscribe down below that we can get the latest on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. Appreciate you making Locked On Coogs your first listen today. And if you found us on YouTube, welcome back. It's so good to see you again. Remember to hit subscribe on the YouTube channel because we're doing a giveaway every 250 subscribers. The next one of those is at 2,000. Hit subscribe, help us get the like, comment, video, let us know you are in that contest. If, after watching this full episode previewing the Texas Tech basketball team and seeing what they'll do with Houston, you don't know what to say, you're just so dumbfounded, all the things Houston's going to do well, you're just not a basketball guy, or whatever the case may be, tell us in the comments down below your best trash-talking story. I don't care which side of it you're on, just your best trash-talking story. Now, couple things to get into today. We're going to try and preview this basketball game because it feels like somewhat of an important one for the Houston Cougars. First, we're going to look at what the Red Raiders have looked like this season. Kind of who are they? What's their deal? Second segment, I want to look at some like what things do they do? What do they do that can hurt Houston? What do they do that Houston can take advantage of? And so on. And then third and finally, in the last segment, I want to look at the potential matchups and kind of see what the personnel look like for the Red Raiders, because honestly, I think Houston matches up fairly well across the board, man-to-man with these kind of guys. And anyway, we'll say that for the last segment. First, Texas Tech. Texas Tech on the season is 14-2. Now, that is really, really good, especially considering that they're 3-0 in Big 12 play. And as of the recording of this podcast, they have just officially moved into first place in conference. They're the only team with 3 wins and no losses, 3 or more wins and no losses in Big 12 conference play. Impressive start to conference play for them. They beat Texas in Austin. They beat Oklahoma State. They beat Kansas State. Impressive start to conference play for them. It doesn't get easier. Obviously, they play Houston on Wednesday and then BYU on Saturday. So they still have some tests down the road. We may learn more about them. But Texas Tech looks really, really good, to say the least. Now, Houston's obviously like at the top of KenPom and Torvik and the analytical measures, but Texas Tech is not far behind. The 30th in KenPom themselves, and they just into the top 25 this week. They're sitting at number 25. The Big 12, for its worth, has 8 top 25 teams. It's 8 out of 14. That's more than half of the conference resides in the top 25. Texas Tech being another one of those. Houston fell just to 5th, so I think most odds makers do have Houston as the favorite in this through their analytical models. The KenPom folks have Houston. I guess KenPom is actually just KenPom, but I think he has people working with him, but I digress. They have Houston winning by 12 at home, 71-59. We'll get to more predictive kind of stuff later in the episode, but I do think that most odds makers see this as a game for Houston to get back on track, even though Texas Tech is so good. And I think that kind of sets it up to be a dangerous game because Texas Tech is a very good basketball team. They play at a slow pace. They average less possessions per game than Houston. They have long possessions. They're so in the full 333 Division I college basketball teams, they are 298th in terms of how long their possessions are. So really, really long possession, slow basketball game. Interestingly enough, though, they do shoot 4 out of their 10 shots per game are from 3, and they shoot those at an almost 36% clip. So that's better than average in both spots, or more than average and then better than average in both those spots. So they do kind of play feels like a more modern type of shot selection with lower shots per game because they're playing less possessions and longer possessions per game. Now, this is obviously Coach Grant McCasland's first year there. He comes in after the mess that was left in the wake. I guess Beard left, they had Adams in between, and now Coach Grant McCasland comes from North Texas. Really impressive job at North Texas and turned that around as a CUSA program. And I guess, are they in the American now? Anyway, I stopped paying attention once we left that thing. But McCasland did a great job at North Texas, getting that to be an established program. And then he, packed his bags and went to Lubbock as soon as the thing called for Power 5 job. I think folks in Texas are noticing that he was able to put together a roster really quickly. A lot of transfer guys. Of their 8 guys that get significant minutes, 6 of those guys were not at Texas Tech a year ago. And 6 of those guys were transfers in, with 5 of that 6 not being at Texas Tech last year. And I look at this roster and like they're kind of gelling, which is interesting to see when you see so many new faces. It's mid-January. They've had some tough matchups, and now they're starting to come together as they're hitting their stride in conference play with the new coach. So the guys that have been there getting used to his coaching style, the guys that haven't been there getting used to each other, like all those things coming together. And of course, that means it's time to play Houston, because why not? If you're looking for, you spend your day-to-day looking for things to watch on these guys, I watch their games against Oklahoma State, Texas, and Kansas State, as those are the Big 12 games. I can kind of double up on my note-taking there, frankly. Texas has some athletes, but of course using them poorly for what it's worth. And then Kansas State kind of imploded at the end of the Texas Tech game. So that's in my notes for those episodes later in the season, obviously. As far as other games for you to check out, if you're like, I need more of this, I want to know more about these guys. Their big wins are they knocked off Michigan on a neutral court. They beat Oral Roberts, which is a program I've always thought it's pretty strong for a mid-major. They beat them in Lubbock. And then they lost a game to Villanova that was not so close, but it was on a neutral floor. I've been impressed by Villanova this year. And then they lost to Butler in overtime in a close one. Those are games I'd pay attention to as far as like games against good competition. Butler is a team that scores a lot of points. That game got up to, I guess Butler scored over 100 to win that game. So that's a game that got kind of sped up as far as like looking at those kind of things. Texas, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State are not able to really speed them up. Texas Tech did score a lot of points against Oklahoma State, scored 90. But I will say part of that looked like to me was because of Oklahoma State turnovers, not necessarily a pace of play kind of thing or anything like that. Texas Tech is a very, very disciplined basketball team, and I think they're going to try and do what they do very well, and I don't think they're going to try and do things that they don't do, right? They're, in that sense, frankly, a team that Houston should look to speed up, should look to get under the skin of, and should look to apply ball pressure to, and really force into turnovers, feed off what ought to be a great home crowd, and kind of get the momentum early and kind of step on the throat and never let it off, right? That would be the way I think this game ought to go. Now, things don't always go as they ought to, especially when you're looking at a team that has so many new pieces to it, Texas Tech. Now, I want to talk more about what they do as a basketball team and what kinds of things Texas Tech's going to do well. But we just talked about how many new guys they've got. And if you're looking to add new folks to your roster in the same kind of way, you need to go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege, because it is the start of the new year and every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the move that I can make that'll take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team you surround yourself with, even if you want to bring in a bunch of transfers like Tech did. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy. We have that many qualified candidates, so it's easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get qualified candidate within 24 hours. Post job to LinkedIn for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. It's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right. So as far as things they do really, really well, I thought it was interesting that against Kansas State, they really shortened in a home game at that. They shortened the rotation, really just went about six deep. Some people would say that that's a weakness. I see it as a strength of those six basketball players that they nearly all played 30 or more minutes. That implies a tirelessness in a close competitive game that literally came down to the final seconds. It was weird at the end of that one, Kansas State. The clock didn't run on the final possession for Kansas State, so we didn't actually know the game was over. They go check the replay, see how many seconds went off. I think they probably played an extra couple seconds, if I'm being completely honest. Now, they typically play with one true postman and four kind of guard-ish type guys. One of them is kind of more of a tweener. They do a really good job defensively and fronting the post. And I thought it was interesting for Houston's standpoint. Houston has liked to open games this season, last season, the season before, by getting the post involved early. This year's JVA, last year was J1. We've seen it be Fabian before. Houston and Kelvin Sampson like to get the ball to the post early and kind of establish that as their half-court offense and work outwards from there. Texas Tech's going to make that really challenging in how they front the post, have to keep the ball out of the post. And so that tug of war, much like early in this segment, could happen early in the basketball game, right? Who wins that battle of positioning between Francis and Tech? Or is it a high-low with J1? Or how do they get the ball into the post and get those guys involved early? Because Houston does a lot of that work early in the game to kind of, as a basketball coach, getting your post involved in offense early, generally in speaking, creates a more engaged game from them just because it's a natural thing to be involved when the ball's in your hand, and being conscious at the start of the game sets the tone for that, right? But B, if Houston were to have to get out of that, what does that make the rest of the game look like? Because you don't really know what Houston does or does well if they don't establish that early. So look to see how Houston gets the ball into JVA or through J1 Roberts to him against that kind of big time post pressure. The fronting of the post, lobbing over the top is going to be challenging because of where Francis is best at with the ball. So we'll see what kind of things they do there. As far as other things that happen down around the blocks, they do a great job of taking charges and those kinds of things. They're a decent offensive rebounding team. Texas Tech is not crazy, not like Houston is, or not like certainly not like Iowa State was, not like Texas A&M was, right? They do a good job, not a great job of offensive rebounding. So Houston got to find bodies, but frankly, I anticipate Houston winning the rebounding battle. If you're an offensive guru, I'm an X's and O's guy. I'm a basketball coach by day, or in this case, by night. So that's why we're recording a little later here. They do a lot of what we call horn sets, and horns are a very common set in college basketball, but where you have like an upside down hook 'em horn, where you have two guys in the corner, and then two posts at the top of the key, right? And then they break things off of that. And then they had what I'm calling a broken horn set, where they would then go from the horn and the two posts at the top of the key. One will stay high, one will drop low, and then they'll run like the guards that are in the corners in various lifting type of positioning. Now, it's important to remember that they run this horn set with one true post and one kind of tweener guy, and the tweener guy does a lot of the work on the perimeter. But I thought it was fascinating that in what I'm going to call a tech set, because they run it a lot, when they split those guys and shoot one to the bottom of the court down by the baseline and keep one high, they actually did a lot of work with the traditional post being the one out on the perimeter as a screener, and the more tweener type athlete down more at the baseline because he can screen and pop out and do all kinds of movement actions. And so those kinds of things I think are kind of counterintuitive to what you would think would happen, because they're going to get a guy like a defender like Francis out on the perimeter involved in pick and roll action, and then have J1 be the one roaming the baseline in various help type situations, assuming that they guard a traditional 5 and a traditional 4 with the traditional 5 and traditional 4 that Houston have, right? Now, they run those kinds of sets and get all kinds of actions and screening and stuff like that in their most basic levels of offense. I do think that they're really good at running these actions where once those guys are split, they kind of run screens on both sides of the floor and make both sides of the floor cover and play defense. And if they're doing that, that makes it hard for the help side to be there once actions start happening down toward hill towards the basket, because you're tied up and also covering your shooter coming off the screen. You're helping us, the screener, to make sure that they don't have a clean passing line. Like, all those things are happening while the other side's coming down to the basket. And that can be, frankly, good coaching on their part. How Houston, I think, will defend that is by monitoring the post, double teaming ball screens, forcing a ton of ball pressure. The things we've seen them do so well under the Kelvin Sampson tutelage, right? Like, it'll be all of those kinds of ways to take that away. But I do think Tech runs those kinds of sets and are interesting in that, as far as teams Houston's played, they more visibly are running clear-cut sets in a way that's not like these quasi-NBA offenses you've seen Houston had to cover against TCU, for instance, or when they went up to Ames, or when they played Texas A&M. You saw a lot of like kind of free-flowing creativity. You know, Texas Tech has true traditional sets, not Princeton offense motion necessarily, but like true traditional sets that really make you stay disciplined in what your defensive assignments and coverages are. I say that. That's what they clearly want to do. That's clearly what McCasland would like to be good at. The way they came back against Kansas State, though, at the end of that basketball game, was by completely tearing that apart and not doing that. They didn't get Kansas State to come back in the basketball games. They were down at home to Kansas State. And how they came back and won that game was they spread it out, and they went 4 out, 1 in. And they did a good job of like getting the ball to go side to side from one side to the other, court to the other, to make the defense kind of rotate and shift. And they attacked downhill. And they had an 1-3, a 4-point play, and they had a bunch of shots to the rim. They got the free throw line. And that space and pace feels more like modern basketball in the same kind of sense, where Houston runs a lot of pro-looking type of offensive actions and stuff like that. They ran that a lot against Kansas State down the stretch to come back in that basketball game, get free throws, get downhill, space it out so you can get to the basket, right? They didn't show that as much against Texas and Oklahoma State, but Kansas State's the more recent game, and they had success at the end of the game, ultimately winning it because of it. So I say to say that if I don't mean to like hedge my bet to be like, I'm going to be right on this, but I could see it going either way. I could see them running the kinds of sets that were very disciplined sets they ran against the majority of their opponents. Or I could see them saying, hey, we found this thing that worked against Kansas State at the end, something we don't have much film on. Houston might not be as prepared for it. Let's trot that out there, right? We'll see how they go about that, what they want to do and what McCasland wants to do as the guy in charge. We will figure that out as we go. As far as their defense goes, quickly, they do double the ball screen with pretty much anyone except for 22, their traditional big. We'll talk about the personnel in the next segment. He'll try and do more of a drop because he's just so big, and he's a really, really big guy. They had some success versus Texas running zones. I could see a team saying Houston stall out on offense from time to time and think, I can zone those guys as well. I can get away with that against Houston. It was a 3-2 zone. It might have been a 1-2-2 zone, but an odd front zone where there's one guy at the top to kind of make sure the ball forces directions. If they do that against Houston, look to get Cryer and Sharp in the corners. Let's get J1 to the middle so he can kind of distribute from that area. Houston's got personnel to really, really destroy an odd front zone if they're into it. I will say, though, that when Houston's in those offensive lulls or not shooting the ball well, like they've been a couple times in the last couple games, obviously the zone might be the way to go. Now, as far as the way to go is concerned, Houston's got to get back in the win column. And I think, frankly, it may be early in 2024, but we all need to get back in the win column. And I'm going to tell you to go do it at FanDuel.com, because right now, as the NFL playoffs are starting up, there's still time. There is still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Just place one. It's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. And this weekend, if we're all trying to win, Houston Texans are 9.5-point dogs. 9.5 points against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, obviously, we're rooting for the Texans to win as Houstonians, but moreover, 9.5 is a lot of points. Like a lot of points. And I feel like confidently Houston's going to be okay. And I feel like you should do it at FanDuel.com, America's number one sportsbook. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet. At FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, so I also want to talk to you for a second, though, about, while that's fun, winning is fun, some things that maybe not as fun, because I know we come here to talk about sports and escape from the crazy realities of life, but sometimes you got to prepare for real life. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin, and right in the middle of the worst flu season over a decade, that can be scary. And I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if my wife or my 7-month-old or someone got sick while supply chain issues kept them from having life-saving medication they need. Thankfully, we'll be okay because we have Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, and other things. This stuff can happen to any of us. Visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. This will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medication will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today, so go to jasemedical.com. Use offer code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first order. Jason Medical, be prepared. All right, so I said I want to finish the personnel. I know this may feel backward some, but I think what they do, because McCasland's the new guy in charge, actually dictates their personnel in a weird way. Their top scorer, head of the snake, first guy to take account of, is a kid named Pops Isaac. Now, Pops Isaac, I should point out, and I don't want to just speed past, is a guy facing a little bit of legal trouble right now. Looks like some sort of a civil case tied to his name. He is still playing. Innocent until proven guilty. Houston's got to prepare to play him. I just hate to say that very well could be they play him this time and don't see him again, right? He is a good scorer downhill, 16.3 points per game. Decent shooter. He shoots about 30% from deep, but he shoots 7 or more threes a game. And so that 30% means he's going to make a couple because he's shooting so many of them, constantly shooting off the dribble, really attacks, like I said, downhill. When he doesn't have the ball, he doesn't feel like he's super active. He's waiting to get back in his hands. But like the way Houston runs Jamal Shead on the HP dive downhill, that's going to be Pops Isaac for them. He's a good basketball player, a fiery guy, kind of their leader in a lot of different ways emotionally, it looks like to me. And so got to know where he is. I imagine at 6'2", he draws the Jamal Shead matchup because stopping him is so important. It's not like he's outside the realm of a guy Jamal can cover at 6'1". I'm putting Jamal on him if I'm Kelvin. He's smarter than me, Kelvin is, but I'm putting Jamal on him. The other tough matchup I see for Houston is Warren Washington, their big guy. He is a true 7-footer. I mean, if you told me he was 7'1", I would believe you. He looks taller and longer than 7 feet. He's averaging 10 points and 7.5 rebounds. His offensive game is that of a roller, lob threat, putback, stuff inside of 5 feet. They do try to feed him the ball in post-ups inside of 5 feet. I watch him, don't think that's his strength. He's much better on catching putbacks and catching lobs and being athletic and long. He's a transfer, bounced around a lot. Texas Tech is his 4th school. I will be interested to see Francis will start him. JB or Francis will start him. I will be interested to see how Houston attacks him because, as I mentioned, he does play up at the top of the key in some of their offensive kind of stuff as a screener, then roll to the basket. So I could see Houston almost going small in some cases to get Jawan Roberts up with him to cover, because you want Jawan up on the, playing defense out on the perimeter. And then also offensively for Houston when they go small. If Texas Tech is playing a man defense or some version of a man defense, you're pulling him away from the basket because we have a true traditional big in there. What Warren Washington is really good at doing is playing a two-step gallop help side defense. That is to say that if there's a traditional big in the dunker spot, he is really good at taking a two steps or a gallop and defending the rim at all angles of drivers. If you have a smaller guy in there who's more like 15 to 20 feet away, that's a bigger distance for him to cover to come off of help side and then go help at the rim, right? Now, if you're a pro basketball person, there is no defense 3 seconds in college basketball. So that dunker spot, he might just camp out in the lane with Francis because we know Francis also needs to finish inside of 5 feet. And so I see Houston kind of yo-yoing how that goes, kind of keeping him on his toes. To put Francis in to start, obviously, but then also use J1 or Tugler as small ball center kind of guys to kind of pull him away from the basket some, hopefully drive him a little crazy. That'll be an interesting match to see, to say the least. Great defensive center, impressive kid for sure. Again, 7 foot and looks long. The third guy I'd say, as far as keeping track of guys that Houston got to find, is Joe Toussaint. I think it's pronounced Toussaint. If it's Toussaint, let me know. He is a shorter. He runs some point guard, some shooting guard. So I don't want to. We'll call him a combo. He looks to be about 6 feet tall. I guess he's been listed at 6'1" on some places, but if you told me he was 5'10", I'd believe you. He's a great shooter. Shoots 33% on threes in the season, only getting 4 attempts up per game. But he is also, I think when you really see how good a shooter he is in the mid-range. He does mid-range jumpers on movement. He'll do it falling away. He'll do it come off of screens. He'll do it on curling actions. He'll do it on catches on he'll stop on a dime driving, sprinting down to the basket to catch what he thought's going to be an offensive rebound and just catch the ball because the guy had passed the last second and he jumps. It's all very quick actions for him. He does not need a lot of time or space to get the ball off. And I'm really, really impressed by him. And frankly, I want to point out he can get hot. He did that against Texas in the first half of that game and kind of helped build out a Tech lead. I do think that it's worth pointing out he does a lot of two-guard stuff that works off of Pops Isaac because we know, as I mentioned, Pops Isaac is not very interested in not having the ball in his hands. But you also see, whenever Isaac is out, but also in different sets where you're going to spot up Isaac in the corner. Joe Toussaint does a lot of the point guard duties as well. I could see this being an Emanuel Sharp matchup because of the importance of it, not because LJ Cryer can't do it, but because Emanuel Sharp's a really good defender. I could see this being a Sharp matchup. The J1 Roberts matchup for me is going to be Darian Williams. Darian Williams is interesting in that he is kind of that tweener 4 I've been talking about. Darian's listed at 6'6", 210. If you told me he was 6'5", I'd believe you. But he's got broad shoulders, and he does a lot of the power move kind of stuff down low and inside. But then when they make him step out, he shoots 40% from 3. He's only getting 3 attempts per game, which if I were the coach, I'd be getting a guy that shoots 40% a lot more. But he does the inside-outside stuff well. He's not one that's going to put on the floor a whole lot. He's not going to dribble the ball a whole lot. But he's got a decent back-you-down post game. He can also hit it from about 10 feet out with the back-down post stuff. And then he'll just spot it from 3. He shoots the ball very well from 3. So he's going to find where he is athletically. I feel like J1 should be okay with that. And, we'll see what they decide to do. Or what Houston decides to do, if anything different. And then Kerwin Walton. Now, Kerwin is, I don't know. He's listed as a guard. He's listed at 6'5". I'd probably say he's a little bit smaller than 6'5", but Kerwin, I think Kerwin's going to be an interesting matchup. And Houston very well could put Emanuel Sharp on him from a size perspective. You don't want to get out muscled at those spots or anything like that. As far as importance to what they do, as far and the 3 true guards, I think he kind of actually matches up with LJ because LJ, we want to make sure we have like his legs for offense. Um, what do I know? Sampson's much smarter basketball coach than me. Maybe he'll get that one right and I'll get it wrong. But from an importance level, I want the defense Sharp is playing to be covering either Pops Isaac or Joe Toussaint. From a size perspective, he probably matches up better with Kerwin Walton. And so we'll see what Houston does in starting lineup there tonight. But that's the tug of war I see is what do you go with? Now, obviously, there'll be sets where you've got Damian Dunn out there. There'll be sets where you've got Ramon Walker out there. There'll be sets where you've got any number of different like kind of twisting of matchups. Jojo Toke will play the center spot some, kind of throw a wrench in all of it. But I think it's interesting what you do with that spot because Kerwin is big enough, both broad and tall, that you, I guess, can reasonably be worried about. Is he just going to back you down? McCasland's good about finding, has been proven to be good so far about finding physical mismatches. So we'll see what Houston does there. We'll be following it maybe a little bit later than live. We'll see how long my game on Wednesday night goes that I coach in. But we'll be following on all social media platforms, including live tweeting on X. So make sure you go follow me at Painsworth512, PAINSWORTH 512 on all your social media services. Thank you all so much for making us your first listen of the day. Appreciate you stopping by to help preview the Houston and Texas Tech matchup. But Locked On Coogs is a proud Locked On podcast network. That means your team, our Coogs, every day. Go Coogs.